Welcome to this grab bag on cold calling. Cold calling is a really useful questioning strategy that can drive up the extent of participation in our classrooms. It's backed up by common sense and it's backed up by plenty of research evidence too. Dallimore, Hertenstein and Platt say that cold calling increases the number of students who participate voluntarily in class discussions and does not make them uncomfortable when doing so. I want to suggest there's three main reasons, therefore, to incorporate cold calling into your teaching toolkit before giving you a strategy that you might want to try. First, as with any kind of questioning, cold calling can be used in several ways. We can use it as an assessment for learning or responsive teaching tool, which enables us to moment by moment check our students are understanding the concepts being taught before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So a question, you can think of a question as being a tiny little learning event for the student because you're asking them to retrieve something they've been taught, and in doing so, you're helping them strengthen it in their long-term memory. Second, there's the important issue of inclusion and inclusivity. The same three academics whom I just mentioned on the last slide also say that cold calling has a significant equalising impact on the ratio of male to female participation in the classroom. That is, cold calling increases the overall number of responses by females compared to males, although both sexes answer more questions voluntarily in a cold calling classroom. Or to put it even more simply, it stops the lads from taking over and shouting out all the answers. Third, then, the use of cold calling can increase the proportion of time that students spend thinking hard versus the amount of time they're not thinking hard. And this is known as Lemov's participation ratio. And this is the heart of the strategy I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. So that's the why. Now let's discuss the how of cold calling. In theory, it's very simple, and it starts actually by not doing something. Don't allow shouting out, and don't ask for hands up. Now, of course, there's times when these are appropriate, but my personal advice is to use them sparingly. So why should we not allow shouting out, and why should we minimize asking for hands up? Well, as we've already thought, giving free rein means that some students end up shouting out or putting their hands up all the time to volunteer answers. So we end up with few students answering most questions. And if other students know that they'll only have to answer a question if they want to, then we're giving them the opportunity to sort of sink into the background and maybe even disengage. So some students may therefore not think about the question at all. And then on top of that, if you're asking questions and getting correct answers from, let's say, 4 or 5 of the most switched on students, it might be tempting to think that their answers are representative of what the group knows and then moving on to the next topic too soon. So it can give a false impression of what the group has learned. So this is why I'd not recommend the overuse of hands up and certainly not allowing shouting out. Let's compare 2 ways of asking a question. Let's say you ask this question and you want to get an answer from Megan. Here's an example. Megan, what is the capital of India? Now, as soon as you've asked that question, who is thinking about the answer? Megan is thinking. And who's not thinking about the answer? Well, probably pretty much everyone else. So for that period of time, the participation ratio is way down. You've got lots of people not thinking hard while they wait for one person to do their thinking. And we'll finally get our answer from Megan. But if we multiply this across lots of questions, we've got a bit of a problem in terms of participation ratio. So here's a nice, simple cold calling strategy you might want to try called pose, pause, pounce, which you may have heard of before. So what you do is you begin by telling the students not to put their hands up and that you'll call on them to answer the question or the questions. And that just sets the expectations. Then you pose the question. What is the capital of India? But without indicating who will answer. So you pose your question. At this stage, all of the students might still be asked to respond. So in theory, now, as you pause, and the amount of time you pause for will depend on the difficulty of the question. As you pause, in theory, everybody is now thinking about that question because they still might be asked to respond. So you pause to allow thinking time, and then finally you pounce on the person that you want to answer by using their name, Megan. So by using this strategy, we're increasing the participation ratio because everyone is thinking. We're also managing the levels of inclusion and inclusivity because you can spread the questions around the whole class and even differentiate question levels as appropriate. And we're also engaging our students in retrieval practice. You may have also heard of pose, pause, pounce, bounce, where the bounce part is where you pass the first student's answer to another student for further elaboration or explanation. That can be really helpful for deepening thinking in some more discursive topics. There are loads of other cold calling strategies like think, pair, share, no opt out, and so on. If you want to find out more about these, head to the how-tos, go to the teaching strategies heading and look at questioning. You can also dig deeper. Some of the references are there on the screen for you, or you can email me and I'll point you in the right direction. That's all for this grab bag on cold calling. I hope you found it useful. See you in the next one.